Tip number 2 is, have a long-term perspective. And this is part of learning how to overcome rejection, is have a long-term perspective, meaning when somebody rejects you, that's not the end of the world. They're not the only fish in the sea. Once you find somebody to marry, you're not even going to be concerned about the past and the rejections that you had in the past. Look here in Matthew, I'll see if I got the right verse here, 13. Here it is, okay. Verse 44. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto treasure hid in a field, the which when a man hath found, he hideth, and for joy thereof goeth and selleth all that he hath, and buyeth the field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a merchantman seeking goodly pearls, who when he had found one pearl of great price, went and sold all that he had, and bought it. We have this perspective in dating and in finding a spouse, that when you find that the pearl of great price, all the belongings that you have, they're not going to matter, right? This guy's just selling everything because he realizes what he's found. And I think it's the same when you overcome rejection. If it doesn't work out, hey, maybe that's just a way God has hindered you from getting into a relationship that you shouldn't have been in. But when you find that wife, when you find the woman that you are to marry, you think you're going to care about all the ladies that didn't want to marry you? Or the same with the ladies, all these men that it didn't work out with. When you find that man that it does work out with, and that's the man that you want to marry, you're not going to be so concerned about all the men that it didn't work out with. So have this eternal perspective, right? Have this long-term perspective that the day when you find a spouse, it's not even going to matter all these rejections that happen. And we see that principle again even with salvation and with tribulation, right? Where the Bible says, the suffering that we experience in this life is not even worthy to be compared with what we'll get in eternity. So even if you don't end up married, let's say you're seeking a wife or you're seeking a husband, even if you don't end up married, when you get to heaven, you're not even going to care. It's not even going to matter. It's not even going to cross your mind like, I wish I had gotten married, because the lowest thing in heaven is going to be infinitely times greater than the best thing in this life. And that's why, when you think about any pleasures in this life, sometimes we think about, I don't get to enjoy this trip. I didn't get to travel there. I didn't get to see this thing. And people will sometimes say, why don't you live life instead of just living this constricted Christian life where you're going to church and you're going soul winning every week. Why don't you go and travel and live your life? You know what? When you get to heaven, all those pleasures of this life, it's not even going to matter. It's not even going to matter what you experience in this life. I don't care if I don't get to see all the idolatrous temples in Peru or, whatever people do. They go sightseeing and all they're seeing is all these icons of false religion. It's like, I don't want to go and visit these temples and what am I going to go to Mecca and see that cube that they worship there? Yeah, the Kaaba. I mean, I don't care what it looks like. When I go to heaven, I'm going to care even less. And that's why we ought to spend our life serving the Lord, because that's all that's going to matter when you get to heaven. It reminds me of those, videos on Facebook. These videos come up and these people with the GoPro cameras and they're doing all this crazy stuff, going down the zip line and I don't know, all these crazy things that they do that they capture on these GoPros, and you see them and you're like, oh, that's pretty crazy. But usually, I see these videos and there's the tagline of don't get caught up in the rat race where you neglect to live your life and live life to the fullest. There was a man in the Bible that lived life to the fullest. We know who he is. His name was King Solomon. And he lived life to the fullest. And he didn't hide anything from his eyes. He didn't hide any pleasures from himself. And you know what his conclusion was? He said, let us hear the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of man. So we don't need to find out that for ourselves. Somebody in the Bible has already done that. He's already lived life and didn't get caught up in the rat race. And you know what his conclusion was? Serve God. Because that's all that matters. All these other things, he said, were vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. All is vanity. And that's what it's going to be like when you get to heaven. They say, don't get caught up in the rat race and neglect to live your life. No. Don't get caught up with your life and neglect to serve God, because that's all that's going to matter when you get to heaven. So have this long-term perspective. You have this long-term perspective, and you're not going to get so caught up on the relationship that didn't work out. You know something is coming down the pipeline, and even if it doesn't come down the pipeline, you're not even going to care when you get to heaven. I think if you just have that perspective, you know, obviously I'm not being incompassionate. You know, obviously rejection is hard, and when you're going through it, it's difficult. And it's, you know, obviously it's easy for me to get up here, you know, and you say, well, Victor, it's because you're married, and you know, you can say all these things. Well, yeah, well, there's a lot of things I can say. There's a lot of things we can say from the Bible. I'm not discounting that it's difficult. I'm just saying if you have this perspective, it'll help. It'll help you get over it.